What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Age of Quarantine. Not just any episode, our 1 year anniversary. I really can't believe that we are at that 1 year mark. Bittersweet times, but I gotta say, we really appreciate the support, during this incredibly strange time. All of you who have been watching the show, talking about it to your friends, sharing, commenting. It goes a long way, and everybody who's been supporting St. Vitus and buying merchandise, all the records that are on sale now through the St. Vitus shop, had to get really creative in being able to stay alive during this weird time. But I want to thank Caroline Harrison, who is our co-host and handles all the marketing. Dave Castillo, co-host, who was also one of the owners and head talent buyer at St. Vitus. Artie Shepard, who is also one of the owners and co-hosts of the show. Andrew Castle for designing all the flyers, and Ralph Torres of Total Meltdown for handling all of the video editing. You can watch all the episodes on my YouTube channel. It's been one hell of a year. We've had everybody from Bad Brains, Agnostic Front, Pro-Mags, Chelsea Wolf, Zola Jesus, Emma Ruth Rundle, and tonight's guest, Ray fucking Cappo, Youth of Today, Shelter, Better Than 1,000, New York hardcore legend. What else is there to say about that? He started Revelation Records. He started Equal Vision Records. He is a yoga instructor. He's a Hare Krishna devotee. He also started Super Soul Records and discovered Vision of Disorder when he signed to Roadrunner. He is a visionary. The guy is a fucking visionary, and he's just a great. He's been a great voice for the hardcore movement, advocating straight edge, the vegetarian lifestyle, and it's guys like that that really have made a real impact on the world. I feel like that guy is somebody that we owe a lot to. And they played one of the last shows, Shelter played one of the last shows I ever saw at St. Vitus. So great memory. And we're going to have Ray Cappo joining us for the next hour or two. And we're going to talk to him about what he's doing these days. Got a lot of questions for him about how, he started his journey to where he is now. Thanks for being patient, everybody.
What's up, brother? How are you?
How are you, Ray? How are you?
Good to be here.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Sorry if the directions were a little tough in trying to navigate.
I did 3 interviews today because, after I was on that Ritual podcast, I got so many requests to do interviews, and I went away with my family last week. So I pushed everything to this week. So I've been doing like interviews every day, and I just lose track. And I was man. And so I was like, where is this one? And the only, yes, I apologize.
Oh, no, please. No apologies necessary. Are the interviews accumulating since Shelter had reissued your When 20 Summers Pass record, which just is now available for streaming with all the bonus tracks? Has that been kind of a part of your interviews sort of increasing?
No, they're sort of different. It's sort of like more of like my yoga career than my music career.
Got it.
It's been less music, although that's a cool record. I really appreciate what they did. I used to be a mad record collector, so I appreciate funky wax and cool gatefolds and things like that.
It looks beautiful.
I had nothing to do with it. I just gave some input, but I think it might be one of my favorite designs and packaging for a record of all time. It's sort of cool. When I was young, the coolest thing was like Public Image. The PIL came in like like a metal casing. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Plasmatics always had speckled vinyl, speckled wax, which nobody had back then.
Right.
To get a picture disc was unique and rare. Bow Wow Wow or Adam and the Ants or something like that. But that was about it. It was hard to find, occasionally you find a colored wax, and that was random. But now they're just doing such cool things. And gatefolds are so cool too.
vinyl made a huge comeback, and I'm really glad because the physical aspect for I'm 40. I'm a little bit younger, but I'm not that young by any means. So I do remember buying records.
Isn't it
And
amazing how 40 is not young anymore?
I
Like you're
know.
40, but it's like you're you're so much younger than me.
I don't want to fan out too hard. It's going to be hard not to, but and it might make you feel old. But I first saw Shelter when Attaining the Supreme was a new record on Equal Vision.
All right,
And
so you're pretty old school.
yeah, I saw you guys at Coney Island High, and that was 19. You could correct me if I'm wrong with the time frame. I feel like it was 1995 when that record came out.
No, that record came out earlier. That record came out like 1993.
Oh,
If
you know
that's
what it was?
if that's the tour you saw, but we also did a show at Coney Island right when Mantra came out too in 1995.
It must have been the Mantra era then, but I just
Yeah.
remember, yeah. But yeah, man, I'm really excited that you're here. This is actually our show's 1 year anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
So, thank you, thank you. And Shelter was one of the last bands that I saw at St. Vitus before everything shut down. So it's a cool thing to have you join us on this program. And I worked very hard with other people that helped me with questions because we were saying Ray does. By the way, is it cool if I call you Ray, or do you prefer to be called?
No, you can call me. Yeah, I'm fine with Ray. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
For asking.
Yeah, we were like, this guy has done a million interviews. We can't ask him all the same questions, so we have a nice collection of stuff. If that's cool, we'll just kind of go ahead and get started. I wanted to ask you first, though, as a formality, how you've been managing to get through the pandemic.
That's a good question. I live out on a farm in a dirt road, and other families that live near us, like across the way, our kids play together. And so I like sort of like a little bit of isolation and going inside a little bit. For my kids, they did pretty good too. My littlest kid suffered a little bit. I think he needed a little bit more social life, but for me, it gave me a chance to sort of go inside. I also do a podcast, which I started randomly before COVID. And so it worked out really perfectly for the beginning of it's 2021 now. So the beginning of 2020, I started a podcast on January 1st called Wisdom of the Sages. It's like a Krishna, we study sacred books from India. But there's like sometimes a hardcore element because a big group of our people are from like the hardcore scene. Some are from the yoga scene. But then I got asked to be on Joe Rogan, and that was like it blew up our podcast a lot too. And so it just sort of made the podcast a sort of a daily fun thing for me. So it helped me a lot. Just having a community of people who are sort of like into uplifting their life and working on their, working on going inside for their joy instead of going outside. I felt like it was perfect timing for a pandemic.
Yeah, I think.
Don't get me wrong, I lost my mind a little bit too. And
I'm sure. I mean, it's a transition. I mean, honestly, like, we all have our ways of coping with things and dealing with things. And I think that podcasting and the reason we are doing this is because St. Vitus is a music venue, obviously. So we're used to socializing and being out and just living and breathing the nightlife of bands showing up and playing. So it's a great way for us to stay engaged with the people that appreciate we have people watching right now that are all commenting. And so it's just a great way to connect with people and the artists that maybe would have been playing if this was not the case. But
now, is Artie Shepherd one of the owners of the club?
He is. Artie, I know, had roadied for Shelter at one point, right?
Yeah, Artie's an old friend of mine. A great guy. I love him.
Artie's the best, man. He's excited that you're here. I like to try to use this opportunity to go back a little bit. And like I said, we kind of tried to cater the question so it's not totally generic stuff. But I want to start with this, though. Obviously, you have been in bands forever. And I wanted to know, before punk and hardcore entered your life, when and how did you learn to sing, play instruments, and what was the music that was the antithesis to get you sort of like active in that sense?
I'm going to sit down on my floor here. It's interesting because I was always sort of into music from childhood. I played violin and trumpet from like third grade. But I I didn't like rock and roll. I couldn't figure out what was my musical thing. And so as kids were starting to get into music, I didn't like rock and roll. I didn't like Kiss. I didn't like, the bands back then were the bands Chicago, Led Zeppelin. I wasn't attracted to that. At the same time, I was just playing classical music. And then a time like eighth grade came around, I went to New York City because my family, I have a bunch of older brothers and sisters. So my parents were from New York City, and then they raised their kids in Connecticut. And so when my older brothers and sisters got older, they all moved back to New York City. So I would visit them on weekends. And I remember going to Bleecker Bob's. I don't know if you remember that store.
Oh, of course I remember Bleecker Bob's right in the West Village, yeah.
Yeah, right in the West Village. And back then it used to be on McDougal Street, I think. And I walked in there and I saw punks, and I was like, oh my God, what the hell are these guys? And I was like shocked out of my mind. And I just realized like there's a different reality here in New York City. And I'm not privy to it because I live in a monocropped, suburban high school in Connecticut. And so then I just started like on my own. I got to figure out what this music is. And one of my friends who was a little older that was in band, he was really eclectic, really musical, and he liked sort of weird music. And he said, man, you should listen to this band. And he gave me the Sex Pistols record. And when I heard the Sex Pistols, I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, yeah.
And that sort of like just changed my whole trajectory. You know what I think I think what the beauty of the Sex Pistols was we're not going to play. We're not going to stay in the box. We're not going to color in the lines. We're going to do things that any way we want to do them. We're going to say what we want to say. We're going to be who we want to be. We don't want these stupid album covers. We don't want these stupid lyrics. And it was like shocking. It was like shocking.
What year was this when you, was it when they were pretty new at that time?
No, that was probably 1980.
Okay.
1980. I was probably ninth grade, maybe. And then there was a slowly, I got some other friends who were sort of like on the edge, and we sort of like started sniffing around New York City, running. And we had no like guru. We had no teacher to say, you should listen to this. Don't listen to that. This sucks. You should listen to these guys. All we had was like the Village Voice, which was a magazine, a free New York City magazine about the Village.
Yeah, I used to live across the street from there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and so there was always like ads in the back and CBGBs and the Mud Club, and we were punk was over, so we were trying to figure out what is next, and it was a cross between, because music started going alternative music, because you got to understand every type of music was like, Cheap Trick, Leonard Skinner, Jay Giles Band, like that's what. These were arena rock bands that everybody in my high school went to. So I was like, what is punk now? Okay, punk's dead. The Sex Pistols broke up. Sid Vicious died. What's punk? And I had no one to tell me. I had to figure it out on my own. And I'd look in the back of the Village Voice. I'd look at CBGBs. But CBGBs didn't just have punk bands. They had just weird local bands. And I was like, is this punk? Yeah. But I was like on a quest to find Johnny Rotten and who are the Sex Pistols. And I remember at that time, Steve Jones was playing in Kraut.
Was he really?
Yeah, right around the corner from my brother's house. And my brother lived in Jackson Heights. I was like, Steve Jones is playing around the corner from oh my God. And so then I started going to these shows in New York City. And it was random because, again, I didn't know what was cool, what was not cool. I didn't even quite know who I was. Like, because a lot of it was like, if you listen to like, 1980s music, you had a cross between the Culture Club and Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. And in effect, what was it? I can't even remember. I can't even remember. Martha and the
Wave music.
Yeah, the new wave was more 70s, but it was like sort of dancey, Men Without Hats. And I mean, even though that was sort of like wimpy, poppy dance music, it was at least freaks. I mean, we were freaks, and we were desiring to be freaks. We didn't want the status quo. We wanted to be outside the box. So, okay, Boy George's going to dress in drag. That's cool. Bow Wow Wow, Adam and the Ants are going to dress up like pirates. That's cool. anything that was sort of like non-mainstream, we were attracted to. And then, you know, we heard Black Flag and Dead Kennedys, and we started getting, and we still couldn't decipher what is what.
Right.
And then, so
by the way, who were you with when you were discovering this stuff? Were you alone, or do you have a group of friends?
I had a very big suburban high school in Connecticut, and I had maybe 3 friends that were interested in anything peculiar. And but I would bring generally one of them to New York City with me, and we'd stay at my brother's. So one weekend we went to the Ritz to see, I can't remember, it was Bow Wow Wow or Haircut 100 one night. The Ritz is the old Irving Plaza.
Right.
And
no,
I mean, what was it? Webster Hall. Hall. And so the Ritz, I mean, everybody played at the Ritz. U2 played at the Ritz, and
Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Slayer.
Yeah, Slayer. So anyway, we went to that show one night, and then we wanted to go to CBGB's the next night, and that night the UK Subs played.
Oh wow!
And I mean, I've never heard the UK Subs. I just know it sounded punk. So, you know, the UK Subs. All right, whatever.
Right.
And everybody started slam dancing, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is unbelievable!"
Right.
And I didn't even know. And you know, of course, New York has a style of slam dancing. They have a way to dance. They have a club. They have like a unique posse that you don't just like invade. And so I barged into the pit, and I had a big mohawk down to my chin. And I had a big long trench coat on and engineer boots, and I just started slamming everybody.
Right, pushing people around.
Pushing people, and that's something you just don't do in New York.
Right.
And I remember exactly who it was. It was John Watson. He grabbed me by the neck.
Singer from Agnostic Front, yeah.
Yeah. Who now I know him for years. He grabbed me by the throat and was about to punch my lights out. And I was like, I was like a lamb. I didn't know anything.
Oh my
I didn't
God.
know. I thought we were supposed to just sort of run into each other. And so he grabbed me by the neck, about to punch me. And I just said, "I'm sorry. I'm new to this." And he spared me. Isn't
John Watson a Krishna devotee now?
Yeah, he was one of the first Krishna devotees in the punk scene.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I was and then
that was my entrance level. That was my entrance level. I did my first stage dive that night too. I got real bold. I just got on stage and jumped off.
That's incredible, Ray. During those days when punk was a lot of Sid Vicious characters and things like that, were you ever into the drug or drinking scene? Before you discovered straight edge and started living a clean lifestyle, were you, like, in those early punk days, were you participating in some of those sort of cliche things that people were doing?
Truthfully, that first day I went to CB's, I didn't even know people slam danced. I didn't quite have my identity. I was like in 9th or 10th grade. I didn't really know who I was yet. I knew I liked sports and athletic things. I was on the wrestling team, and I was into being healthy, but I also just wanted to be loved and appreciated and cool. And so I remember going to CBGB's, and I actually ordered a drink at the bar and sat down, and because there was tables.
Uh-huh.
And all of a sudden everybody started slam dancing. Yeah. So, but very soon me and my friends, we started despising alcohol because we felt like, not because we even heard of straight edge, but we've just felt like we didn't want to be like anything like anybody from our high school.
Got it. Like, and the jocks and
we didn't want to be those jocks. I was picked on from like, 7th grade on. I was picked on, and I was, there was blacks and there was whites, or there was, it was interracial school, which it is a good way in a lot of ways, because you get to learn that the world is like a melting pot. But another way, unless you organically mix people, like, okay, we're all on the football team together, we're all on a sports team together, where you're at, otherwise it's like salad dressing. You say, hey, see, it's an integrated school, but no, people go back to their gangs. So there's gangs of blacks, gangs of wealthy jocks, gangs of, these potheads, and everything was like gangs of Cambodians, everything was like a gang. And I had no gang. I was poor, I was white, and I couldn't relate to anyone. I just hung out with like a nerdy clique that couldn't fight our ways out of a paper bag, and I was just picked on and extorted from, and bullied for money every day. And finally I just had to, like, literally and figuratively fight my way to the top of the pecking order, where you don't feel bad for me for getting picked on, because I gave it right back. I started picking on people. I started bullying people. I started being, cruel to people, and any way to get some type of respect. And it was, it's all sad and pathetic in retrospect.
Well, it's survival. That's exactly, it's funny to relate to that, because honestly, when I discovered hardcore and when I went to see Shelter for the first time, I was very new to the whole thing, just like you were when you went to go see the UK subs. And the reason why I even ended up there in the first place was because I was in Long Island getting picked on, and we needed to get the fuck out of there. So we did what you did, just a little bit later, and we went to St. Mark Street and the Bowery, and your friends in bands were the bands that we saw that made us feel alive.
Sure.
When we could leave and retreat. But yeah, I was just really curious about that, because that was such a thing in the early 80s, was getting fucked up all the time. And I know you guys
oh man, it was like, I will say that I gotta hand it to I gotta pat myself on the back, because there were so many drugs, and I don't know why. Maybe it was my mom telling me never to take drugs, but I just never got into drugs. And truthfully, as soon as I sort of like went to those first shows, and my friends were like, yeah, we're not going to be like these high school jocks. So I was lucky. The guys in my band, Violent Children, we just said, we're not drinking. That's not our thing. And then we just started going to shows in New York, and we just said, that's not our thing. We're going to be into, crazy music and stuff like that. We're just not going to get mixed up with these people that are just like, I mean, they were much worse than the kids in high school. They were huffing glue out of bags and taking angel dust. And it was the 80s. People were, not this crowd didn't smoke cocaine, but the club crowd was all into cocaine and, and crack. Sure. Yeah.
It's funny, because I know the story about Johnny Stiff, of who is, anyone out there that doesn't know, he's just this guy that's been around forever, driving bands around New York. And I guess the story, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that he was driving you guys to go play a show, and telling you that straight edge would never become a thing in New York. And one of the reasons why I was intrigued by that is because as a guy playing in bands in New York up until the early 2000s, I think still now, Johnny Stiff still drives bands around. And so I knew him as a guy that drove me to play shows a bunch of times. And then one day I heard this story about how he challenged you guys, and that's where, and I put two and two together. I was like, that's fucking crazy, Johnny fucking Stiff. So tell me about that moment, because I'm so curious.
I'm gonna back that up a little, because if it wasn't for Johnny Stiff saw Violent Children's first show, and he was there because we played with Moby's band, the Vatican Commandos, Urban Waste, Reagan Youth, Agnostic Front, Cause for Alarm. This was Agnostic Front before Roger was in the band. So this was 1982, a benefit for the Anthrax Club in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And the cops came, they raided the place, and we all had to hide under the stage. So we got to play our set, but we all hid under the stage for the rest of the show. Then Johnny Stiff came up to me after the show. He's like, man, I love your band. I'm going to have you guys play in A7.
Holy shit.
We played the most miserable show ever. The band sucked, and we played, but we got to go to A7, which was great. Yeah. So anyway, I always knew Johnny Stiff. He'd always get us. He got Violent Children played with the Cro-Mags at CBGB's before the Cro-Mags had a record out. So that was like incredible. So Johnny Stiff would always hook us up with shows. He was just really kind to us. I have great memories of him. And I don't think he said it really in a challenging way.
Okay.
He was just sort of like, it was sort of a joke that I was straight edge, because nobody was straight edge. It was like, it wasn't challenging. It was like, you think you're going to make a straight edge scene in New York? And in my brain, I was like, no, I don't think that. I have no intention on that, sir.
Oh my God.
You got to understand, I was like a 19-year-old. So Johnny Stiff was probably 27. if you were 27 back then, you were considered like an old man. I remember Ray B's being, 25, 26. It was like, he's an old man. Vinny
Right.
Stigma was 26, 27. He's an old man because we were 17. We met Roger and Vinny when we were, practically children. I mean, I used to be a pen pal with Vinny when I was 16, and he took me to his house in Mott Street. And, it's just
And
like,
he's still there. We had him on the
he's
show.
still
He's
there.
still there.
He's
Still
great.
there. Yeah, and how did your parents feel, by the way, about you going into the city and doing this kind of stuff?
They knew nothing. They knew nothing.
Oh, they didn't know. They didn't know.
No
Okay.
way. Are you kidding? I told them I was visiting my brothers, and I told them I was going to see some music. That could be anything. Sometimes I'd come back, my leg of my pants would be ripped off. And then, what happened to you?
So you just had to get creative, I guess, with your stories. So you just mentioned Vinny Stigma was a pen pal. Were you writing him? Did you get like Victim in Pain or United Blood and send a letter to him? Is that how that happened?
No, I mean, I was into them before the single came out, but when the single came out, I like fell in love with them even more. But I saw them at A7 and before Roger was in the band, and then when Roger joined, the single came out. It was incredible. And you got to understand, there was no records out in New York. When I got into New York scene, there was the Beastie Boys record just came out, the single. The Misguided had a single. And although I liked those guys, I didn't like the music really. The False Prophets had a single. And Kraut had a single. Kraut put out their second single. And Kraut was great.
But they really were.
They're really great.
I was listening to Walter's show on Vans last night. He was talking about Kraut, and it was a really fascinating take on it. So it's cool that you're bringing that up because they were just as good as the Clash or the Sex Pistols or the Ramones, and they just never got that kind of respect, unfortunately.
Well, I think they broke up. I think they did go to California. New York bands just never toured that much, and everybody thought Kraut is going to be the band. I think that was the feeling, like Kraut is going to be that band to break New York City. But anyway, then very quickly the mood changed in New York, and it got harder and faster. And sort of Agnostic Front and Cause for Alarm just stepped on the, in the wake of Urban Waste, Reagan Youth finally put out their record. Urban Waste put out a single, and The Abused and Antidote put out a record. And that made a whole new buzz in the air. But you got to understand, then people didn't press that many records. They pressed 1,000 records or 2,000 records, maybe. But that was New York. And DC was already happening. Boston was already happening then. But it was like, everybody's sort of waiting on the edge of their seat while these bands release records.
Yeah.
It was exciting. And then when Agnostic Front and Cause for Alarm came, I felt like the world shifted. When those two singles came out, I remember my older sister, bringing me to go to, I was still in high school, a junior in high school. So I must have been like 16 or something. And she goes, "Why don't you come and check out NYU? Maybe you'll go to school at NYU." And in my mind, all I was thinking was, I would love to meet you at NYU because it's right by 99 Records, and I can buy that new Cause for Alarm record.
Oh, man.
And so I remember being with my sister at a restaurant right by NYU. And I was like, "Can you wait here 1 second?" I ran out, bought the Cause for Alarm record. And those two records were so great when they came out. I can't even explain. I bought the Cause for Alarm record. Skins, Brains, and Guts was out by 7 seconds.
Oh, I love going on like this tangent with all this old stuff because this is the real shit. Like, and you're mentioning a lot of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, because if you got into it later, it just seems like old stuff. But if you got into it sort of like at the time when I got into it, you see the layers of the scene changing. Like literally when CFA and Agnostic Front came out,
yes,
it was they were game changers right there. Right. Things started shifting around. So at that point, I started writing Vinny Stigma, and that's how you met people back then. There was no internet or cell phones or anything. You write people letters, and so they put us on a show. They put us Violent Children on a show. We're a bunch of idiots from Connecticut who couldn't play their instruments, and they gave us a gig at CBGB's. And I remember Roger giving me $100, and I was like, $100?
Oh my God.
We've never got a dime our entire life. This is the most money we've ever got.
That's great.
And,
I heard that Roger and Vinny, like without, like they kind of ushered you in, and at that point, that was like kind of like the world opened up for you to kind of maneuver through your journey, I guess. If that is that fair to say?
It is fair, but I'm going to give a lot of credit to Harley Flanagan too, because Harley Flanagan was such like, he was, first of all, he was an incredibly talented guy.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Like, he's not just like a cool guy. When you got to understand, when I was in Cub Scouts, Harley Flanagan was in the Stimulators. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So he was in a punk band when he was in 6th grade. He put out a book with Allen Ginsberg when he was in like whatever 5th grade.
Crazy.
His parents lived at I think he lived in a squat in Denmark where he became like proficient, like good drummer, bass player, guitar player. The guy was incredibly gifted.
Yep.
And he was also like the toughest guy in the world, like out of a comic book, almost like toughness.
Yeah.
And he was sort of famous in his own right. Like, even for me as a kid in Connecticut, I knew who he was, and it was almost like a reputation of sort of like cool meets sort of like notorious, like this guy's scary. And when you're 15 or 16, that it appeals to like sort of like a dark energy in you, like, yeah, maybe I'm scary, maybe I can find myself in this person.
Yeah.
And I really didn't know him that well, but a bunch of 25-year-old guys who were from the Connecticut scene asked me to join their band, and I was 16. They were 26 and I was 16. They were 10 years old, 10 years older than me.
Yeah.
10 years older than me. And I didn't know what I was doing. But I liked Ignacy Front and Cause for Alarm, and I liked to scream, and I liked the New York vibe of stuff. And these guys were incredibly proficient. They were like real music. They could play their instruments great, and they were really unique. Truthfully, they were the same guys that played on the Shelter Attaining the Supreme record.
Oh, okay.
Not Attaining Supreme. Shelter Perfection of Desire record.
Okay, so that was well, not Tom Capone, right? You probably
not Tom Capone, but the other guys.
Right. Okay. And then sorry, you still there?
Yeah, I'm writing comments in here.
Oh yeah. Sorry
it's
to everybody
fun.
who I'm ignoring.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Heart Attack. Heart Attack, I loved. I loved that band.
Jesse Malin's band, right?
Yeah, he's still around. But I want to say, I'm going to just put something out there for Heart Attack. Live, they were incredible. Jesse Malin was such a good performer, and he was so talented. He was one of those guys I was like, oh, you can be punk and actually good at music too. But they were really old. They were really old. These guys were like, this predates everything. This must have been like that Heart Attack single. Luckily I got that record back in the day. That Heart Attack.
That's a real early one. I love. You know what I know we're going off on tangents here, but it's great. We're just having a national conversation. Is that Antidote record that came out back in the day? That's another one that doesn't get enough shine because it's
that one. It's almost like they blew up after they broke up.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
they're one of those bands you discover. It's like, who was it? Like Mozart or something. Like after he died, he became famous. Like, yeah. I'm still.
Well, let's get back to you for a second, because I could talk about the New York stuff all day long. But I'm wondering, with the youth of today taking such a hard stance with the straight edge and vegetarianism, etc. At the time that you said was kind of like there wasn't many people like that. Did you feel pretty accepted, or did you feel like you were experiencing some dangerous situations with folks who may have had issues with what you guys represented?
I'm answering the Heart Attack question. Is God Is Dead the first single? And I wrote yes. I think it was the first like hardcore single out there.
I heard that too, by the way. Yeah, I heard that too.
It was, by the way, even in 1982, I couldn't find that record. I got that record later, like in 1985. Some kid was selling it. I got it for $1 on the street. But anyway, your question is, was it difficult to speak about straight edge?
More if I could phrase it better, basically, did you feel at that time that you were well accepted when you came onto the scene with Youth of Today with your message, or did you feel like it was did you end up in situations where you maybe felt unsafe because people may have had a problem?
You know what's weird? Youth of Today, I will say in all honesty, Violent Children sucked. My band sucked. But Youth of Today, I felt like, I can say this to this day today, Youth of Today never had a bad show. From our first show, I felt like I love this band so much. And I remember Agnostic Front, Victim in Pain just came out, and Roger asked me if I wanted to try out for drums for Agnostic.
Oh, wow. I never knew that.
Right when Youth of Today started, it was like 1985, and who was the drummer? Dave, I think, from Mental Abuse, I think.
He was the one that played on Victim in Pain, I think.
Yeah,
right?
so he was leaving the band, and they needed a drummer, and he said, "You want to play?" And I go, I would be honored to play, but I started this band Youth of Today, and I love it. And yeah, it was cool. It was nice to be asked.
Oh man, that's wild.
Yeah, right when Victim in Pain came out, that was such a good record. I probably had a lot of skinhead tattoos on my head if I had joined that band. I'm sure.
For sure.
But anyway, so there was no straight edge scene, but right before we left we went on a California tour in the early days before Can't Close My Ass came out. 7 Seconds decided to put out our single, Can't Close My Eyes. It was a single first. And they said, if you just get to California, we're doing a whole tour and we'll take you as our opening band. And we were like, what? This is like,
they were your favorite band, right?
It's like my favorite band in the universe, basically. 7 Seconds, Agnostic Front. I love these guys. Cro-Mags, love those guys. But like Agnostic Front, we were like, I mean, Harley, in one sense, he was sort of like, I didn't finish that story, but Harley liked that band that I was in, Reflex from Pain. And we played our last show at A7. And no one, if you were like not from New York, no one watched you play. You could be anybody. Everyone just walked out. All the hardcore kids left. So the only person in the club was Harley. And we played Motorhead, Iron Fist. And my guys in the band could play it so good. And and Harley just really came up to me after the show, and he just was really nice to me and kind to me. And from then on, I felt like, okay, Harley likes me. I'm safe. I'm safe in New York. And I felt like he gave me the golden ticket to like.
That's an incredible story. You're telling us a lot of stuff that I don't think we've heard in a lot of other interviews. So this is great stuff. Very cool.
Well, this was like, I was not like a New York kid, really. I used to go to New York, but I used to always go back to Connecticut. I never slept overnight at the squats. That wasn't my scene. And then after I got back from California with 7 Seconds, which was that's a whole interview in itself. What was it like to be on tour 7 Seconds right when Walk Together, Rock Together came out, right after Trust the Crew just ended, and Walk Together, Rock Together just came out. They took us on tour, and it was like a dream come true for
we'll get to that because I have some questions about 7 Seconds anyway. So
hold that thought.
Yeah.
So all right, so I came back. So right before we left, Agnostic Front and Youth of Today played at CBGB's.
Okay.
And nobody knew Youth of Today. I'm sorry, is that what I said? Agnostic Front and Youth of Today played at CBGB's, but no one knew Youth of Today. Because we didn't have a record out. They just, but there was a little bit of a buzz about us. And I, for some reason, in the midst of an Agnostic Front crowd, I started preaching super heavy about straight edge.
Oh, wow.
And I just was like going off. I just felt like you got to go in loud. You got to go in loud and just say your piece, and people don't like it tough. And then the show was over. We got good response. Agnostic Front killed it. And then we went to California. And when I came back, and then I stayed in California and lived with 7 Seconds for a while. And then when I came back to New York, we had a family apartment in New York City on 15th Street.
Okay.
It was like the rent was like $250. It was like Yeah, it was an old crappy apartment, but it was, you know, cheap and it was in the family.
Right.
And so I moved there and I was like, we're just going to move to New York. And Purcell moved in with me. And the other two guys in the band were just like, no, we don't want to be in a band. We're just doing that for fun. We want to go to college and get careers.
Right.
So we were looking for a bass. But when we got back to New York, our single came out and we became famous. We became famous in the New York hardcore scene, like overnight.
Right.
And we started running into the usual suspects because we knew people because we'd go to New York City. And I ran into Todd Youth, who was like I knew Todd Youth since he was 12 years old practically. And he's like,
that
hey.
guy was a fucking legend, man. Jeez. Yeah.
He was a legend. This guy was a legend.
Yeah.
And he's like, Ray Cappo, I can't believe you're here. Guess what? I'm straight edge. And in my brain, Todd was heavy into drugs. I was like, you're straight edge?
Right,
He goes, yeah.
Right.
And he's like, you're never going to believe who else is straight edge too. Ray B's. And I was like, Ray B's is straight edge? Like, you understand, nobody was straight edge. And all of a sudden, everybody's straight edge now. And it was like mind blowing. And I was like, no, what? And so then I went and I met Ray B's. And I didn't know Ray B's back then until that night that I moved to New York City. And I ran into Todd and Todd and Ray B's was just like, opened arms. We became best friends, me and Ray B's that night. But Ray B's was always like sort of crazy into drugs and stuff like that. So I was sort of like feared him. But now he's sort of like, I'm on Ray B's good side. He got me a job part-time working at the Pyramid Club, you know, with him and Todd and Jimmy Gestapo. And it was like a whole scene. It was just like a whole scene. Then Purcell quit school and he moved in with me. And then we got Tommy and Craig, who's now world famous from Sick of It All.
Tommy Rat, Craig Ahead, yeah.
Not Tommy Rat, Tommy from Straight Ahead.
Oh,
the singer of Straight Ahead. Tommy Carroll.
Yeah.
So Tommy Carroll played drums and Craig Ahead. I mean, you don't understand, Craig Ahead, he's like the best bass player in the world, man, this guy.
Oh, so good, yeah.
And he was good when he joined the band when he was 15. I can't even imagine that. Guy was incredibly talented. And so he joined
you playing CBGBs with Craig on YouTube that I found from those days. Really an amazing performance.
Yeah, and so it was cool. And then we just started up and playing in New York, and then then it just started taking off. And then strangely enough, the suburb of New York, of Westchester, where Purcell grew up, he said, "You're not going to believe this, but there is a bunch of kids in 9th grade who are all into hardcore." He grew up in he grew up in Westchester. It was a very white bread community, you know, and upper, you know, middle class community. And so Purcell was the weird punk of the school. And I remember once he played this Battle of the Bands in his like normal Westchester high school, and all the freaks showed up from the Anthrax. All our freaky, crazy, you know, crazy cars and crazy haircuts. You know, back now everybody's got a crazy haircut, you know, but back then it was bizarre. If you had plaid pants on and a green mohawk and you showed up at a suburban high school and started slam dancing, it was insane.
Right.
And so so anyway, Purcell came up to me. He's like, "You're not going to believe it, but there's like a bunch of like 8th graders or something that are all into punk." And I was like, "No way, 8th graders?" He's like, "Yeah." I can't remember. They were like 8th grade, 7th grade. And he goes, "Yeah, and they're playing at the Anthrax." And I was like, "You're kidding." So we all went. The Descendants were playing at the Anthrax with Crippled Youth, who later became Bold. And we went to meet.
That was the first Bold show, the first Crippled Youth show.
The first Crippled Youth show was packed. And right after the show, we just went up and talked to them. And they knew who Youth of Today was. And we just introduced ourselves. And we just took them on as our younger brothers. And we just started to say, "Hey, listen to this." Like, I never had that person in my life to say, "Listen to this record, listen to this record." So we became that for them. We're like, "Listen to Jerry's Kids, listen to Gangrene, listen to Ignacy Front, listen to this, listen to that."
Right.
So that's how it rolls.
And you brought up 7 Seconds. Who, you know, it's funny because being a big Shelter fan. I didn't realize until later on, because 7 Seconds wasn't really on my radar as much. And when I got into 7 Seconds later in life, I noticed a lot of similarities between your vocal style and sort of like the trajectory of like some of Shelter's music, not all of it, and similarities with some of the later 7 Seconds material. You want to talk just a little bit about the impact that Kevin had on you as a vocalist and as a songwriter?
Yeah, Kevin probably was a heaven sent to me, because there was, at a time, especially in New York, it had a very violent edge. And when you're a teenager and you're trying to figure out what is right and what is wrong and good and bad, and music's powerful music like hardcore, it's such a powerful energy. Any message you deliver, it could be a message of peace or a message of hate. It's powerfully spoken. And so I will say that I was like a screaming psychopathic force, but 7 Seconds changed my direction from going south to going north, because all the straight edge stuff, you can use all that for your ego, or you can use it to better humanity. And so if it wasn't for 7 Seconds, I felt like I would have used all that stuff for my ego. And they broke new barriers on songs, about writing songs about, care and love and positivity. And I felt like these people speak right to me. And so I fell in love with this band when they went on tour. Violent Children played with them for the what's it called, the crew tour. So we played with them and then when they came back, this is what happened. You know what happened? During the crew, we all sang along with them. Like, the club was very small. And when Walk Together, Rock Together came out, on the jacket, on the inner sleeve, there's all these photos. There's a picture of me and Kevin singing along. And I was like, what?
Yeah, hell yeah.
And Steve Youth, no, it was Kevin. Kevin is wearing a Violent Children t-shirt on the back of Walk Together, Rock Together. And I tell you, I almost wet my pants. When that record came out, I almost wet my pants. And so they came back on tour and they played, and we played with them in Albany, and we played with them in Rhode Island, and I remember they wouldn't let us play with them in Connecticut. They trying to like piss us off or something.
Oh my God.
But we were with them, traveling with them in their van. And we had just recorded Can't Close My Eyes, and Kevin just said, "Hey, we want to put out that record for you." And we were like, what? We were just like having
Right. I mean, that's wild. I mean, so you really had the support. I guess that really answered my earlier question. You did get a lot of support from people, which is great. And without getting into like all the generic stuff like that we've all heard in other interviews, because I wanted to stay I didn't want to make you answer the same questions over and over again. With how you found spirituality and all that stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there for us to kind of learn that part of your journey. But I wanted to ask the same question about when Shelter became a band. What was it like in terms of the acceptance from your community or the outside world, being a Hare Krishna band? Probably. I mean, I had never heard of a Hare Krishna band until I heard Shelter, and it was actually later on that I realized that Cro-Mags had some Hare Krishnas in the band, right? And but like you said, they were kind of scary looking, on Age of Quarrel, like Carly has a knife on him, you know what I mean? So it's a little bit different. So what was it like for you experiencing that amongst your peers?
I think by the time the Krishna thing came around, I was already double opted in. I didn't give a shit what anybody thought. If I could make it through straight edge and all the shit that I took for being straight edge, then I was just like, whatever, this is what I believe in. This is what I'm doing. I didn't really give a shit that, you don't understand. It wasn't like we went from Youth of Today to Shelter. It went from Youth of Today to I quit hardcore. And there was like a period of my life where I just quit hardcore. And the Shelter record, Perfection of Desire, I'm laying down now. Ugh. If you don't
Go for it, man.
I've been up all night. I get up early. Okay, so I wrote Shelter as sort of like I quit music. It's over. I'm becoming a monk. This part of my life is dead. But this is my farewell record, and and that's why the Shelter record's so weird and wild. That first
There's
Perfection,
a lot of funky stuff going on. It's
funky
kind
stuff
of
going on, and it was my sort of like, it was sort of like my sort of like, this is what I think of you guys. That be yourself. We're talking about nonconformity, and you're all conforming. This is what I think, and it was sort of like, and I just wrote a record, and to me it was sort of like a release. But the more I got into Krishna, the more that I realized that you're not supposed to give up what you're good at.
right.
What you're
Right.
supposed to do is take what you're good at and use it in a spiritual way. So that's the rebirth of Shelter. Shelter, the album became Shelter, the band. Yeah. So did I take shit for it? Did I take shit for it? Sure, I did. That was just part of my whole deal.
Yeah. I'm sure. I mean, well, sorry to interrupt you. I realized there was one part of the question that I missed, which was that I was going to say the Disengage EP is such a good record, and lyrically, it's felt like you were kind of leaning more towards personal topics that we had later come to see come out in Shelter, where it wasn't those classic straight edge anthems and you know, you were modern love story, envy, you know, it just seemed like that was a sign that you were kind of phasing out and going into a different place.
Yeah, well, that's just part of like sort of the growth and the stuff. I was reading a lot of spiritual books, metaphysical books, and that started influencing everything I wrote from, truthfully, from the time I started writing Break Down the Walls.
Yeah.
Break Down the Walls, the story of Break Down the Walls is, we went from, okay, straight edge guys, we got to stick together. It's a crazy world out there. And the more I realized, like, we have to be proud of what we are. We're proud. We're this. Proud. We're straight edge. We're proud. People were proud. They're skinheads. We're proud. They're punks. We're proud. I was like, all this pride. Why are we pride? Why are we proud? Why are we trying to create other people? We're talking about unity, but we're creating others with our pride.
Yeah.
And so that's the whole idea of Break Down the Walls. I used to think that labels were just symbols of pride, but over time I see they only serve to divide. And so it was a concept of trying to find some commonality. And if you actually look back at that hardcore scene, and it can never exist anymore, you had people on the far extreme left, far extreme right. You had like nihilism, like someone's writing in this thing, man, like G.G. Allen. You like G.G. Allen? I couldn't stand G.G. Allen, but you know what I liked about him? He was a freak. And basically,
right.
In 1983 or 1984, we were all freaks. We weren't part of the mainstream, and that's the only thing we had in common. And almost like the freaks had to stay together.
Do you
You know
want
what I
to go
mean?
off
Now it's like
yeah.
if you are Democrat or Republican, you hate each other. You can't even live together. You can't talk together. We're ready for a civil war. All we find is differences with each other. Instead of finding what do we have in common with each other. And when religions do this, it's horrible. When countries do this, it's horrible. You know, when Israel and Palestine, you know when they're going to finally get together? It's going to be when Israel goes, oh my God, you guys must be really suffering. And it's when Palestine starts going, you know what? You guys must be suffering. It's when we can empathize for the other person instead of just saying, you are wrong, and this is where I stand, and this is all the reasons why you're wrong. Try that in a marriage. See if that works in a marriage. You think that's going to work in a country? So I will say that we've created a world presently that is so far gone that I look back at that punk scene. It was such a mixed bag, and our only common thread that we were a bunch of freaks that were not welcome. Sure. We are not welcome in high school. We're not welcome at the mall. Yeah. So anyway,
sorry, I was going to say, because you were mentioning, somebody asked about G.G. Allen, and maybe we can go there for a second before we get into the next thing. But there's an infamous picture of you guys with G.G. Allen. You want to tell us the story behind that?
Yeah, the story behind it was that G.G. Allen, G.G. Allen's G.G. Allen. He was like us in the sense, like me and Purcell grew out of the punk freak movement. We were freaks. We liked freaky, crazy music. So Gigi Allen was playing, and he was playing not like CBGB's. You know, CBGB's is disgusting. A7 was disgusting. Like, he was playing the Cat Club. The Cat Club was like really nice. And I was like, how the hell did Gigi Allen get a show at the Cat Club? So Michael Board, who, I don't know if you know Michael Board, he was like an old, cool, super cool guy, old hardcore guy in New York. Matter of fact, Michael Board gave me a bunch of records once. He gave me an Antidote test pressing. So grateful, Michael Board. Wonder how he is. Anyway, me and Purcell Michael Board got us in to see Gigi Allen, and Gigi Allen immediately befriended us. We became best, invited us backstage, completely normal, completely like cool. He was just like a normal, to me, he sort of seemed like a normal, sort of crazy, sort of like slightly crazy high school jock. That's what he seemed to me.
Okay.
Yeah. Someone's writing in saying, Michael Board was a writer for Maximum Rock and Roll. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. So anyway, we were just hanging with Gigi, but you know, you can hang with people that are different than you and not have to opt into their lifestyle. And that's another thing I liked about, like, I'm not like Gigi Allen whatsoever, but you know what? I can respect he's doing his thing. I don't even agree with it. I wouldn't do it. So he's just like drinking whiskey and getting crazy backstage, but not in a weird way. But then at a certain point in the evening, something switched and he lost his mind. The guy lost his mind. I will spare you the details of the evening, but it started getting real gross, real quick. Real gross, real quick. Yeah. And we got the hell out of there.
Oh, I'm glad that picture exists.
So that photo was classic, though, wasn't it?
Such a classic photo, dude.
And that's before he started. That's before he went over the edge. That was like early in the evening when we were just. I mean, he literally put his arms around us. He must have known who we are and walked us into the club. Like,
that's so funny, man. I don't know if you have a little bit more time. You know, I don't want to keep you forever. You just said that you do get up early, but I had a couple more questions for you.
I'll give you 5 minutes. How about that?
Okay. And then I want to make sure everyone knows where to check out your podcast and everything that's going on. So let's wrap it up. Shelter had come back and played a bunch of shows. Sammy's in the band, which is great to see him back there with you. And I'm wondering if we're going to see any new Shelter material at any point in time, or if, that's.
I'll never write it, but if Purcell writes something, I will sing on it.
Okay. Well,
I know that we're going to reissue the Purpose, the Passion, and the same guys that did 20 Summers are about to reissue that. Yep. But as far as new material, me and Purcell talked about doing something, but it's only if he writes it. I'm probably not going to write anything. I think before I die, I'd like to write one more record, and maybe with all different musicians playing every different song.
That's an interesting concept. I was just going to say the band that you have right now.
Someone writes no ska.
Oh, no ska.
Okay, I promise.
Oh no!
I learned my lesson.
Oh no! Hey, you know what? It takes a lot of courage to try different things, and you certainly tried different things. So, you know, props to you. Okay, well, like I said, I don't want to take up too much time. So let's do this. Tell everybody where they can sign up for your yoga classes, because I think that you are doing them virtually, correct? Or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, supersoulyoga.com. Both me and Purcell teach there. I teach Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Purcell teaches Tuesdays and Thursdays. Let's see. We have a podcast called Wisdom of the Sages. It's a study of sacred literature. It's sort of fun. And the guy I do it with is an old hardcore guy too. We became monks when we were young. And but he's a whole hardcore guy from that Cro-Mag scene, the Lower East Side in the 80s. And yeah, he's totally cool. So we go back way together, and we traveled all over the world, been to India many times together. And we do that every day. But check it out wherever you get podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube.
Great.
And
Great.
yeah, that's it, man.
That's awesome, Ray. Thank you so much for doing this. We're all really pumped that you gave us some time and some really cool stories. So yeah, man, I will definitely be spreading the word about the shelter reissues on our show when they come out, and I look forward to checking out your podcast and your yoga classes. And when the world comes back, hopefully we'll see some Youth of Today shows and
That
some
would be
shelter
great.
shows again.
Hey,
Yeah,
let's tell Artie Shepherd I said hi, and we'll do a part 2 sometime. Okay.
I hope so, and I definitely will. Thank you, Ray. Take care of
Okay,
yourself.
brother. Thanks for everybody writing in.
Okay. Have a good
Ciao.
night.
Good night.
Bye.